Hey, let's go over every single episode of Dragon Ball Z, from the Saiyan arc to the Frieza arc, with a fact or more for each one. Let's begin. Episode 1. The first episode of Dragon Ball Z was originally intended to be episode 154 of the original Dragon Ball, but Akira Toriyama's first editor, Kazuhiko Torishima, was dissatisfied with the anime, so he brought in some new production staff, and decided to rebrand the series. Thankfully, it was a good point to split things off, with Goku now being a father and about to be revealed to be an alien. A huge paradigm shift all around. One of the original titles chosen before Z was Gohan's Big Adventure, but this was changed once Toriyama insisted that Goku was still the main character, suggesting Dragon Ball Z instead. Not only did it sound cool, but Z represented the end of the story. But the name of Gohan's Big Adventure made it as far as having scripts and art with that name on it, with some of the other names considered being New Dragon Ball, Dragon Ball 2, Dragon Ball Wonder Boy, and Dragon Ball 90. Episode 2. In the original Shonen Jump version of the manga, Gohan says that he's 3 years old, only for Toriyama to retcon this the very next chapter, by having him be 4 years old. This change followed suit in the anime and every other reprint of the manga afterwards. Episode 3. The first Dragon Ball Z movie, Dead Zone, takes inspiration from the Raditz encounter for its storyline, with Gohan being kidnapped, Piccolo and Goku teaming up, Gohan raging out and saving his father, even the dialogue between the two fighters once Goku realizes that Piccolo wears weighted clothing. This idea of remixing plots from the main story into something new would be something done for nearly every Z movie going forward. Episode 4. When Piccolo gets his arm blown off by Raditz, his blood is shown as red. Later on in this same arc, it will be changed to purple. Episode 5. This is the first episode to feature Vegeta and Nappa, both wearing very different colors from what we're used to, often referred to as Arlia Vegeta. This episode aired on May 1989, and it wouldn't be until the next month where Vegeta would get his official colors in the manga. So Toei just had to guess, and guess they did. This color palette was corrected once Vegeta gets to Earth, and it's completely recolored in Kai. Well, Vegeta was. Nappa kept his wrongly colored armor. This is also the first time Super Saiyan is mentioned, as Nappa says Saiyan hybrids are something of a Super Saiyan, so not really the same meaning we're used to. Episode 6. How long Snake Way is depends on the language you watch the show in. In Japanese, Snake Way is 1 million kilometers, or a little over 621,000 miles. In the Z-dub, however, it's said to be much shorter, at just 10,000 miles. This was corrected in Kai. Actually, after recording this, I realized that the Oni says 1,000,000 miles.
Snake Way is about 1,000,000 miles from end to end.
1,000,000 miles?! Which is equal to 1,609,344 kilometers, meaning that Goku, well, in the dub of Kai at least, had to run for longer. Episode 7. The title page for the chapter this episode is adapting, chapter 207, depicts Gohan as Sun Wukong, the hero from Journey to the West, a historical Chinese novel from the 16th century. This same Gohan appears in the first ending, riding atop of Shenron. Also, while researching this episode, I found out that the dub calls this character Tien's mom in the credits. She is in no way related to Tien in the original, but funny enough, Linda Young, the voice of the Triclops woman, is the real-life mother of Tien's English voice actor, John Berkmere. Episode 8. For some reason, the anime adaptation cuts out Bulma reading the Z Fighter's power level across the world, using Raditz's scouter. Yamcha is 177, Tien is 250, and Piccolo 329. Instead, she only reads Krillin and Roshi's like in the manga, 206 and 139. Plus, it adds a filler scene of Turtle's power level being 0.001. Because of her use of the scouter in this episode, the cover of the storyboards featured Bulma wearing Raditz's armor. Episode 9. This is the first fully filler episode of Dragon Ball Z, and one of my personal favorites. Gohan befriends a cranky robot and slowly gains courage. In the Dragon Ball GT Perfect Files Volume 2, Masako Nozawa, Gohan and Goku's Japanese voice actress, explained that this is her favorite episode voicing Gohan, saying, "I love the story of little Gohan and the robot. The performers were just me, as Gohan, and the actor playing the robot, and it was the first time I'd done something like that in anime. So apparently, there were opinions to the effect of, 2 characters won't carry the episode, maybe we should can it. But the anime staff said it will absolutely be alright. So the TV network said, in that case, let's give it a shot. Then, after it aired, we got lots of letters saying it was amazingly good, and I was moved. Episode 10. This episode establishes Yamcha's career as a baseball player for the team the Titans, a misspelling of Titans. The Dragon Ball Z anime special guide mentions that this was Akira Toriyama's idea, and that he sent a memo regarding Yamcha's feelings after getting into a fight with Bulma, moving out of West City, and becoming a baseball player, since the manga didn't show where any of the other fighters were prior to training at Kami's Lookout. This would also be one of the few filler things carried over into Super, where Yamcha leads Universe 7 in a baseball game against Universe 6. Episode 11. This episode is largely filler, and focuses on Vegeta and Nappa destroying planet Arlia. The names of the important characters for this race come from lost and ancient civilizations, with King Atla, Atlantis, Lemlia, Lemuria, and King Moai coming from the Moai statues of Easter Island. Episode 12. Similar to Yamcha, it was Toriyama's idea to show what Tien had been up to before going to Kami's Lookout, showing him living with Launch and her chasing after him. This was set up at the end of the Piccolo Jr. arc in the manga, but never followed up, as Launch more or less disappears from the manga. Toriyama later revealed in an interview prior to Battle of Gods that though Launch and Tien lived together for a bit, Tien was only really interested in farming and martial arts, not romance. So she left, but visits from time to time. Also, Chaozu got rich, thanks to farmers hiring him for his telekinetic abilities. Episode 13. The scene where Launch tries to climb Korin Tower and runs into Upa and Bora was also Toriyama's idea, with him redesigning Upa specifically for this filler. He wouldn't show up again until episode 285 of the anime. Toriyama also had a bunch of ideas for Goku's adventures along Snake Way, including his travels through Hell, Princess Snake, and him eating clouds. Episode 14. There's an animation error while Piccolo meditates and causes the wind to blow Gohan away, where Gohan's tail magically returns, despite Piccolo having cut it just a few episodes prior. Episode 15. This episode shows Ox King visiting Chi-Chi as she's locked herself away in Grandpa Gohan's home, as she mourns Gohan's kidnapping and Goku's death. It looks like Goku's house has been built right next to Grandpa Gohan's, which is an entirely filler invention. We actually don't see Goku's home in the manga until chapter 310, but we don't even really get a good look at it until the Cell arc, where it sits by the foot of a river and looks completely different. In fact, the last time we ever see Grandpa Gohan's home in the manga is when Goku returns to it after the first arc, gets his stuff, and leaves for Kame House. Episode 16. This one is also entirely filler, but gives Gohan a great moment of growth. He finds his way back to his family's home, but chooses to turn around and continue his journey, showing just how much he's matured. Interestingly, this is one of the first times the anime shows Gohan making a decision entirely on his own, without Piccolo or anyone else guiding him. He reaffirms his mission to Piccolo, cementing his path forward. Episode 17. This episode shows the Pendulum Room, an entirely filler creation at Kami's Lookout. That's effectively a mind time machine. This marks the first time Planet Vegeta is depicted in any media, with the red skies later informing its design for the Bardock special. We don't see much of the Z-Fighters training in the manga, and although the Saiyans are much weaker than Nappa and Raditz, they reinforce the Z-Fighters' commitment to the cause. Episode 18. This episode has a filler section where Gohan regrows his tail and transforms into an Ozaru once more. But since Piccolo destroyed the moon already, the explanation this time is that Goku's old space pod displayed a stand-in for the moon. But the pod is on an island nowhere near Mount Pautsu, where Grandpa Gohan actually found Goku. And because Piccolo destroys the pod, when Dr. Briefs has to get the pod later to make the capsule ship, he has to rebuild it from scraps, unlike the manga where it's still intact. Episode 19. This is where Goku's training with King Kai begins. King Kai is voiced by Joji Yanami, who was also the narrator, while he's voiced by Sean Schemmel, Goku's voice, in English. Despite having invented the Kaioken, King Kai himself can't use it. This is also where we meet Bubbles, King Kai's pet monkey, who was inspired by Michael Jackson's own pet monkey of the same name. Episode 20. The backstory of the Saiyans taking over Planet Plant comes from Toriyama himself, despite it being filler. The name Planet Plant is mentioned in Toriyama's notes, but wouldn't be established until Dragon Ball GT and Plan to Eradicate the Saiyans. King Kai telling Goku this backstory contradicts some later events, like telling him that Saiyans turn into Ozaru, which Goku is later shocked by when Vegeta does it. The insert song, Battle Colored Warriors, is used during the flashback, one of the rare instances of DBZ using a vocal theme. Episode 21. This is the first episode to make use of the Dead Zone soundtrack by Shunsuke Kikuchi in the original Japanese. Unlike the first Dragon Ball anime, where he made music packages specifically for the show, Dragon Ball Z ramped up the production of the movies so much so that Kikuchi would score them and then that music would be reused in the show. He only made 2 sets of music specifically for the anime, and the rest came from the movies. For example, the Ginyu Force battle theme is originally the theme that plays when Garlic Jr. attacks Goku and Piccolo. Episode 22. This episode is the first time Namekians are mentioned, and Piccolo's origin is revealed. Although Toriyama didn't envision Piccolo as an alien at first, once he came up with Kami, he began to plant seeds for their origin. Back in the Piccolo Jr. arc, Piccolo and Kami communicate in Namekian, and Yamcha even jokes that Kami must be an alien while he possesses a human. We know now, thanks to Daima, that Namekians originate from the demon realm, but fled and spread throughout different planets in Universe 6 and 7. Episode 23. This episode shows the first death of Yamcha and his iconic pose. It's been memed to death in many different series, and even shows up again in the baseball episode of Dragon Ball Super. In Dragon Ball FighterZ, Yamcha can get his revenge by kicking the Cyberman back at Nappa for a dramatic finish. Episode 24. The anime adds flashback scenes of Chaozu and Tien with a little pig creature. This is Ino Shikacho, a dangerous creature Roshi and Master Shen raced together when they were young. He appeared in episode 82 of the original show, a filler episode before the 22nd World Tournament, which introduces Tien and Chaozu earlier than in the manga, where they use Ino Shikacho to scam different villages. Episode 25. The multiform technique Piccolo and Krillin use in this episode is exclusive to the anime. We never see either of them use it in the manga, though the idea of Piccolo splitting in two and fighting himself from episode 15 came from Toriyama. Piccolo uses it again when he's controlled by Garlic Jr., when he trains in the time chamber, and in Dragon Ball Super when he fights Frost. Episode 26. This episode ends with a beautiful painterly image of Goku racing towards the battlefield. These kinds of stills are known as harmony cells, rare, high-quality frames, where the character isn't painted on the animation cell itself, just the outlines, and instead, they're colored directly into the background. This gives them a soft, watercolor-like effect. Dragon Ball Z has plenty of these. Episode 27. In this episode, Goku gets to the lookout and instantly jumps on the Nimbus to get to the battlefield, but it's too late to save Piccolo. Things get a little weird when, later on, Mr. Popo takes Bulma all the way to Yanzabit Heights, on the whole other side of the planet in just a matter of seconds, using his flying carpet. I guess Mr. Popo really didn't want to help. Also, Nappa's attack he uses to kill Piccolo is called a few different things, but its most persistent name is the Deluxe Bomber, aka Episode 28. This episode is the origin of the "It's over 9,000" meme. The original English version that got popular was from Brian Drummond's delivery in the Ocean dub, and is in fact a mistranslation of the original, over 8,000. When it came time to redub the show for Kai, Vegeta's modern voice, Christopher Sabat, recorded 2 versions, one with the over 8,000 correction for home video, and another with over 9,000 for the TV broadcast.
It's over 9,000! What? 9,000? It's over 8,000! 8,000?!
Plus, if it really was over 9,000, Goku would have been able to match and even surpass Vegeta's power level of 18,000 with just Kaioken times 2. Episode 29. In this episode, Goku promises Gohan that they will go fishing after all of this is over, but they won't get time to rest for a long time. Between Goku going to the hospital, Namek, Yardrat, training, and the androids, Goku wouldn't be able to fulfill his promise until episode 169. Episode 30. This is the beginning of the incredible Goku vs Vegeta battle, and the showcase of their iconic poses, which they've used a number of times since then. They would get a rematch in exactly 200 episodes, with Majin Vegeta vs Super Saiyan 2 Goku happening in episode 230. Episode 31. The artificial moon, or power ball, is introduced in this episode, a technique where a Saiyan uses some of their own power to release a stand-in for the moon, which emits blitz waves. In order for the Saiyan to transform into a great ape, they must receive 17 million Zeno units. No relation. When the power ball mixes with the oxygen in the atmosphere, it bursts, opens, and mixes into a moon. For some reason, the Ocean dub decided to say that Goku's father was the inventor of this.
Your father was an average fighter, Kakarot, but he was a brilliant scientist!
But no, Bardock wasn't a scientist. Episode 32. In this episode, Goku realizes that the monster who killed Grandpa Gohan was himself. Grandpa Gohan faced Ozaru Goku at least one more time before his death, as he warns Goku to never stare at the full moon. Goku followed that rule until he had to pee one night. So he went outside and transformed, killing Grandpa Gohan in the process. Although never stated in the series itself, Akira Toriyama's very first description of Goku in Birdland Press 15 mentions that Grandpa Gohan died 2 years before the series began. Episode 33. Although Goku is the first person to create a spirit bomb in the show, he is not the one who actually uses it on Vegeta. Instead, Krillin gets that privilege. But this wouldn't be the only time Krillin would use it, as this scene would inform Krillin's moveset in Super Sonic Warriors, a game where Krillin gets taught the Spirit Bomb and the Kaioken by Goku, and ends up saving the world. Episode 34. The next episode preview for this episode, which was shown at the end of episode 33, shows the Spirit Bomb as looking completely different. Rather than the usual blue glow, it has a black core, likely because it was unfinished. Also in Japanese, Gohan yells out Kamehameha while very clearly using the Masenko. Episode 35. Goku begs Krillin to let Vegeta go so he may face him again one day. This was actually never supposed to happen. Toriyama envisioned Vegeta as any other villain who would die at the end of the arc. In fact, he didn't even really like him. But Vegeta got extremely popular, so he created Frieza to replace him as the next big bad guy to die. So, if anything, Goku begging Krillin was the audience begging Toriyama. As he explained in an interview, Vegeta was a nasty guy at first in the serialization, and I thought about bringing an end to his story as just a villain. But as I was writing, I felt that his villainous, sort of warped straightforwardness was unexpectedly interesting. Episode 36. The anime adds a touching scene which was not in the manga, of Krillin noticing Bulma silently crying as they fly away from the battle site. It's heartbreaking. It also adds a scene where, once they find out about Namek, the team valiantly point forward. This isn't really a scene in the manga, and is instead taken from the cover of the chapter this episode is adapting, 243. Episode 37. The hospital Goku and the others are treated at is called Wukong Hospital, located in West City. It's a pretty obvious reference to Son Wukong, the legendary Monkey King from Journey to the West, and the very character Goku was based on. In fact, Goku's full name, Son Goku, is simply the Japanese reading of Son Wukong's name. Episode 38. While Gohan is recovering in the hospital, there's a cameo from a fox boy in a wheelchair who seems to be Konkichi, a filler character from Dragon Ball episode 83. Konkichi was a thief who tried to steal a plane ticket for Goku, only to end up roped into a bank robbery by a gang of thugs. After Goku helped clear his name, Konkichi promised to change his ways and become a teacher. While researching this, I also found out that before Mario, Nintendo had a separate mascot named Konkichi, a monkey-tailed alien boy who starred in instructional comics. He's very clearly inspired by Goku and even Irelia with that hat on. Not really a Dragon Ball fact per se, but I thought it was curious. Episode 39. Bulma's outfit in this episode is a direct reference to Ripley from the first Alien movie, where she spends the end of the film in just the panties and a tank top. Also, years before Superhero, Gohan fires his very first special beam cannon during image training with Krillin. Episode 40. This filler episode establishes Goku's fear for needles for the very first time, something that would come up in future episodes and is often referenced in the fandom. Also, Qui is established earlier than in the manga as a legitimate threat, and our first real glimpse at the Frieza Force's ruthless planet colonization. In the manga, Qui just shows up, makes fun of Vegeta, and dies. Episode 41. It's very rare for filler characters to appear in Dragon Ball video games, but the events and characters of this filler arc of fake Namek, along with the orphan spaceship, have actually appeared in Dragon Ball Z2, Gekishin Frieza, a card-based RPG for the Super Famicom. But what we really need is Sakrom in Sparking Zero. Episode 42. The healing chamber Vegeta recovers inside of is inspired by the Bacta which first appeared in The Empire Strikes Back. Toriyama was a pretty big Star Wars fan. The anime and manga What If story, episode of Bardock, revealed that the liquid inside the chamber was originally invented by the natives of Planet Plant prior to being taken over by the Saiyans and annexed by Frieza. Episode 43. In the manga, Vegeta tells the Doctor that he no longer needs the Scouter, and just leaves it behind, only to have it out of nowhere again once he reaches Namek. The anime actually fixes this, by adding a scene where Vegeta runs back to get his Scouter after finding out that Frieza is after the Namekian Dragon Balls. Episode 44. This episode is our first proper introduction to Frieza and his army. In the Dragon Ball Super manga, it's revealed that the Frieza Force team that was sent to Namek was only a small selection of men, as it was a secret mission. The team was gathered together by Zarbon and Dodoria on Frieza Planet 79, around the same time the battle between Goku and Vegeta was coming to an end. Episode 45. The team escape fake Namek and make it to their destination, where they're attacked by two Frieza Force scouts. Although they're never named in the anime or the manga, their names are Banan and Sui, names that were first revealed in Goku Gekitoden, with Banan being the basis for the stock Frieza soldier in the Tenkaichi games. Episode 46. This is the last time Goku rides the Flying Nimbus in Dragon Ball Z, outside of Gohan's imagination when he's terrified of Goku getting stuck in Ginyu's body. The Nimbus would be passed down to Gohan, and in the Kanzenban release of the manga, we see the Nimbus one last time, as Goku gives it to Oob. But of course, in Dragon Ball Super, it makes a couple of cameos as well. Episode 47. When the Namekian warriors arrive, they send a Frieza soldier flying. He is then kicked into the ocean and killed by Zarbon. This soldier is Cranberry, a character who, in the Dragon Ball Super manga, is shown to be revived by the wish to bring back those killed by the Frieza Force. He would go on to get arrested by the Galactic Patrol, but eventually helps the wizard Moro escape, and begin his plan to use the Namekian Dragon Balls to gain his magic back. But he is ultimately betrayed and killed once more. Episode 48. Probably in order to keep Frieza's power and mysticism a secret for a little bit longer, Cargo, Dende's brother, is killed by Dodoria in the anime, instead of Frieza like in the manga. Episode 49. Despite the fact that we know Vegeta as the Saiyan Prince, this is never mentioned until this very episode, since Toriyama didn't actually plan him to be a prince at the start. He is only ever referred to as either an elite or a noble, but not specifically a prince. But the English dub, of course, had the benefit of hindsight, so they call him a prince earlier on. Episode 50. The elder Vegeta killed in this episode is named Zuno. Him and his whole village are the only ones not brought back after the wish to revive those killed, because he was killed by Vegeta and not Frieza. Zuno was actually the one next in line to become the Grand Elder, but after his death, Murray was chosen in his place. In the Super manga, Vegeta tries to atone for the destruction of this very village by defending the Namekians from Moro. Episode 51. This episode marks the only time ever where Goku talks to Chaozu in the Z anime, and even then it's indirect. Goku is just happy for Chaozu as he got a new body in the afterlife. In the manga, that's pretty much it, though in the anime, Kid Goku did meet Tien and Chaozu early, and kinda talks at Chaozu once in the Inoshika-cho filler, but even then he barely acknowledges the little guy. Episode 52. This is the first episode since the beginning of Dragon Ball Z to not have Gohan appear at all. At this point in time, Gohan is with Bulma while Krillin and Dende go off to the Grand Elders. As we see in the next episode, he's just kinda meditating. Episode 53. The anime leaves out a crucial detail of Zarbon revealing to Vegeta that Frieza can also transform, something he does tell him in the manga. This means that later on, when Vegeta faces Frieza, the prince just magically knows that Frieza can transform. Episode 54. The absolutely goated Frieza soldier Apul is split into two different characters in the anime, Apul himself and Orlan. While in the manga, Apul goes to find the village Vegeta attacked and reports back to Frieza, this role is instead given to Orlan, who is then killed by Frieza for killing the last survivor who could have known what Vegeta did with the Dragon Ball. Apul goes on to help Zarbon find villages and is eventually killed by Vegeta after he recovers. In the manga, Orlan doesn't exist at all, but ever since then he's been a skin for Apul in many Dragon Ball video games. Episode 55. Although Yamcha is the big baseball star, this episode shows that Tien and Chaozu are also fans, and quite good at the game, since they go through Gregory's test as if they were in the middle of a baseball match. Gregory himself is also one of the most prominent filler characters in all of Dragon Ball. Not only was he designed by Toriyama, but he's been one of the few anime-only characters to make it into the manga. He appears in Chapter 2 of Yo Son Goku and His Friends Return, and in the table of contents for Dragon Ball Super Volume 21. Episode 56. When Gohan gets to the village, he mourns the death of the Namekians and the destruction of the agriculture. Namekians have begun to plant Ajiza trees throughout their planet after the near-extinction event wiped out nearly their entire race and all the plants of the planet. Much like Namekians themselves, these trees originate from the second demon realm and were brought to Namek once they fled to the outside universes. They're simply planted for aesthetic purposes and as a symbol of Namekian perseverance, rather than any sort of food, though some games like DragonBall Online give the Ajiza tree some more mystical properties, like being able to collect Kili, and the symbol on the back of Orange Piccolo is the Ajiza tree. Episode 57. This episode shows Bulma and Vegeta's very first meeting, though Vegeta shows no interest in Bulma at all, and Bulma is much more focused on how pretty Zarbon is. Bulma has a very peculiar pattern of falling for villains, first with Oolong's transformed form, then Yamcha, General Blue, Zarbon, and finally Vegeta. In fact, in the spin-off manga Dragon Ball SD, Krillin calls her out for this exact reason. Episode 58. The anime adds an extra scene of the Ginyu Force departing from a hidden layer within a mountain in Frieza's planet. Although the Ginyu Force are some of the highest ranking members of the Frieza Empire, they're actually mercenaries for hire. Before being called over to Namek, their mission was to take over planet Yardrat for its strange abilities. The Dragon Ball Super manga, though, implies that the Ginyu Force was already attacking Yardrat when they were called by Frieza, so the planet was inadvertently saved by Goku. Episode 59. The two Frieza soldiers who capture Bulma and conspire to steal the Dragon Balls for themselves are named Blueberry and Raspberry. Raspberry is actually playable in Xenoverse and Dragon Ball Legends, where he has alternate recolor palettes for Navel, Monray, and Goopray. Episode 60. The design of Bulma's underwater mech is directly taken from the Pilaf machine. Does that mean that she has two other ones that make up the body and the legs? Episode 61. The Ginyu Force finally arrives on Namek. According to the Dragon Ball Z2 Gekishin Frieza game guide, the Ginyu each have a little backstory to go along with their powers. Jaiz was part of an intergalactic Little League team where he developed the Crusher Ball, Rikum was a ballerina, which gave him his agility, Goldo discovered his psychic skills when upskirting girls, Ginyu switched bodies with the richest kid in class, and both finally, and most tragically, Birder gained his speed because his mom would hit him if he was late for dinner. Poor Birder. Episode 62. There's a filler scene in this episode where Vegeta bullies Goldo around for being weak, and only being in the Ginyu Force at Frieza's request. Goldo is then blasted away by Frieza. There's a mistake in this flashback where the anime decided to use Vegeta's Namek arc design, despite the fact that this should have taken place long before he even goes to Earth, so he should have different armor and a tail. Episode 63. Goldo's time stop ability has a key weakness where he needs to hold his breath while using it. This is completely made up for the anime, as in the manga the weakness is instead that it just takes a lot of stamina. We can see him talking out loud in the manga while he uses it, and he just runs out of breath because he's tired. The Bardock Special. I want to take a moment to insert a fact about the Bardock special here, since it aired a week before episode 64 in place of a regular episode. So, Bardock and his squad were originally designed by Katsuyoshi Nakatsuru, and later completely revisited by Toriyama. Many different ideas were passed around for this special, including having Bardock be an enemy for Goku to face, but in the end they went with the story we know now. And Akira Toriyama ended up liking what the anime staff did with the special so much that he included Bardock in manga chapter 307. It's not often the anime affects the manga so directly. Episode 64. Rikum's beating on Vegeta results in an arm injury that becomes a trend for Vegeta. It returns during his fight against Frieza, then it's broken by 18, injured the same way by Fat Buu, Kid Buu, Zamazu, Toppo, Gaz, and even Omega Shenron in Dragon Ball GT. He should really get that looked at. Episode 65. This episode extends the fight between Rikum and Gohan from just a couple of attacks in the manga to an entire episode. Frieza also rushes to the Grand Elder's home using his hoverpod, the last time he uses it in Dragon Ball Z, before ditching it for normal flight. Although the pod is equipped with an anti-gravity device, Frieza actually controls it using his mind and telekinetic abilities, according to the Dragon Ball Z Kakarot Encyclopedia. Episode 66. The legend of the Super Saiyan is first depicted in this episode as a golden great ape rampaging, though Vegeta believes the legend is more about power itself and not a literal transformation. This flashback would later inform the Golden Ozaru transformation in Dragon Ball GT and Super Saiyan 4, both of which are mentioned as the real form of the legendary Super Saiyan in the Dragon Ball GT Perfect files. In current canon, the original legendary Super Saiyan was revealed to not be a rampaging Saiyan, but a righteous one named Yamoshi, who stood up to the evil Saiyans of planet Sadala before his power ran out and was defeated, though his spirit would wander until stumbling upon a Namekian, who would write his story down in the Namekian Book of Legends. Episode 67. In the remastered English dub, this is the final episode to use the Nathan Johnson replacement soundtrack, as the rest of the series uses the Falconer production soundtrack from episode 68 to the end of Z. Also, Nathan Johnson has since then gone on to become a Texas senator, and this was the very first Dragon Ball episode I watched as a kid. Episode 68. Going along with the last fact, the English dub here completely changed, as Funimation took over production from the Ocean dub, many of which did try to somewhat be similar to the last dub voices, but eventually came into their own. The previous 67 episodes would later be redubbed for the remastered English dub, with these new voices. It overall sounds much different from where they started.
That's right. Our chances of winning are just as good as yours are. That's right. Our chances of winning are just as good as yours are.
Episode 69. A subplot begins here where Bulma tries to use the Dragon Balls to escape Namek. This would eventually culminate in the Ginyu Force taking over her body, getting to the battle site between Goku and Frieza, getting blown away from the fight, switching back, and eventually being taken to Earth. In the manga, she just stays in a single place and does basically nothing until they're teleported home. And although it is filler, these events are depicted in Dragon Ball Super as part of Ginyu's return in Resurrection F. Episode 70. Ginyu's power level is said to be 120,000 in this episode, making him the only Ginyu Force member with a set power level from the story itself. Every other member has only ever been given power levels in games, but they vary wildly. Rikum has anywhere from 40,000 to 71,000, Goldo 12,000 to 19,000, Birder 62,000 to 90,000, and the craziest one, Jais has anything from 64,000 to 640,000. Which has to be a typo, since that would make him stronger than Frieza's first form. Episode 71. Bulma looks at a Goku-shaped cloud and wonders if she blew it, since she could have been with him instead of getting into arguments with Yamcha. This actually isn't the first time she's shown interest in Goku beyond a platonic friendship, since when she first sees him all grown up at the World Tournament, she comments on how handsome he's become, with Oolong calling her a pervert. Then in episode 288, when Bulma is sad about Goku being late, Chi-Chi calls her out and says that Bulma must like Goku, although the dub changes it to have Chi-Chi say that they should trade husbands. Episode 72. The scene where Gohan imagines Goku living on Earth as Captain Ginyu doesn't happen in the manga, but it does appear in it, as the cover of chapter 288. Also, in the English dub only, Vegeta calls him Goku in his mind, instead of Kakarot. One of the first and only times he does it. Episode 73. This is the first episode in the series to be filmed in 35mm film, rather than the usual 16mm, meaning that they had better picture quality than normal. This was only done for episodes 73 to 80, and never again. Episode 74. Vegeta gives Gohan and Krillin a set of Frieza Force armor. This specific armor type is an older model designed for the people of Planet Lit, a planet of smaller beings, though some games use the translation of Rit armor as a catch-all for any Frieza Force uniform. Episode 75. Porunga is first seen in this episode, summoned by saying Takara Puto Poporunga Papurito Paro. In Namekian, Porunga translates to Dragon of Dreams. Dragon Ball Daima revealed that the original Namekian-made dragon from the Demon Realm was a much larger red Porunga, so it seems like the Universe 7 Namekians used him as the model for the one we see in this episode. Episode 76. footage from this episode and the last one was used in December 2015 for a Ford Focus car commercial, where Krillin tries to use Purunga to wish for the perfect car.
Those are our 3 wishes. 3 different cars with 3
Enough! I'm just giving you the Ford Focus!
A separate commercial was made using Buu Saga footage, where Goten and Trunks fuse into the Ford Fusion. Episode 77. This episode introduces the concept of fusion overall to the series, through Nail and Piccolo's merger, something that would become much more prominent in many ways, from the Potara, Fusion Dance, Absorption, and more. In the video game adaptation of this arc, Super Saiyan Densetsu, Piccolo has the option to not only fuse with Nail, but 2 extra Namekians, and even Dende offers himself up for fusion, which massively powers up Piccolo, but at the expense of Dende's free heals. Episode 78. This is King Vegeta's first appearance in any piece of Dragon Ball media ever, as he was only mentioned in the manga before. He was designed by Akira Toriyama, but only his head, and though he doesn't appear in the Bardock special, the flashback in this episode serves as an expansion of the special, revealing that King Vegeta led his own rebellion against Frieza with a small group of elites, before being killed by the Emperor, who then goes on to confront the approaching Bardock. At the time of his death, King Vegeta was the strongest Saiyan according to the Daizenshu, and Toriyama has since then explained that most Saiyans were low class, with only around 10 being middle class and only 2 elites, the Prince and the King. Episode 79. This is one of the most censored episodes in Dragon Ball Z because of the extreme violence of Krillin being impaled and toyed with by Frieza. When it came time to dub it, it had to be stitched together with the next episode in order to cut around a lot of the Krillin scenes. The anime makes this scene a lot more violent than in the manga, which is weird since it's usually the anime which tones down the violence. In the manga, Krillin is stabbed and almost immediately thrown back down, but in the anime, Frieza continues to dig his horn into him, lick the blood dripping down, and even spills it all over Vegeta and Gohan's face. Episode 80. The anime reinterprets the Kienzan barrage as a single Destructo disc that breaks apart into multiple smaller ones, rather than Krillin just spamming the technique like in the manga, which is pretty cool. Episode 81. Because of fusing with Nail, Piccolo knows exactly who Dende is and even seems to have affection towards him. This relationship is reinforced when Dende realizes that Piccolo has fused with Nail by the way in which he fights Frieza, and Piccolo shows off a rare ability of using Nail's voice at one point during the fight.
against me, huh, Frieza?
But this is actually an anime-only thing, since Dende doesn't realize Nail and Piccolo fuse together until after the fight against Frieza is over with. Episode 82. Although never outright stated by Toriyama, it's pretty obvious that Frieza's third form takes inspiration from H.R. Giger's Xenomorph design from the Alien franchise. In fact, Toriyama stated in the first issue of the American Shonen Jump that he loves sci-fi movies, specifically saying that Alien was his favorite film, and that it was the catalyst for him wanting to expand the scope of Dragon Ball into sci-fi. Episode 83. Frieza's final form is his original state, as his previous transformations are his attempt at keeping his power contained since he couldn't control his full power as much. There's not a lot of beings in his race, with him and King Cold being unique cases as they're mutants. Toriyama explained that they're a new hybrid species that came into existence from an accidental spontaneous mutation in our grandfather's time. He also goes on to explain that Frieza doesn't consider his men an army so much as a convenient group of followers. Episode 84. The second half of the Japanese title of this episode is a reference to the first ending theme of Dragon Ball Z, Tobikiri Zenkai Power. The word Zenkai has multiple meanings depending on how it's written. While fans often associate Zenkai with the Saiyan near-death boost, this is never actually used in the series to mean that ability, though the fan relation to that term probably comes from Zenkai spelled like this, to mean complete recovery. But in the actual episode title and song, it's spelled like this, meaning full throttle or full force, which is just a high energy phrase. But I will admit, Zenkai Boost sounds a lot cooler than Saiyan Power. Episode 85. The anime extends Vegeta's attack on Final Form Frieza to make Vegeta look a lot less pathetic. He actually fires multiple blasts, unlike the manga where he fires one single one, which is kicked away and he starts crying. On top of that, King Kai replaces the faceless narrator from the manga as the one who expands on Vegeta's feelings, which is appropriate, since the narrator of the anime and King Kai share a voice actor. Episode 86. This episode shows moments of Vegeta's childhood, taking over planets along with his father. Toriyama's original idea for Vegeta was actually to have him be younger than Goku, not the other way around. But the anime and the Bardock special interpreted the prince as being already a kid by the time Goku was born. So he changed his plans to make it in line with what the anime portrayed him as. Episode 87. This is the beginning of the single longest fight in Dragon Ball, and one of the longest in anime history. The anime was getting really close to catching up to the manga, so it was forced to use a lot of filler. The actual behind-the-scenes process of the staff trying to make episodes, adapt the manga, and not catch up during this time is depicted in the one-shot manga called Zenkai Miracle, published in 1991 in V-Jump, where we're taking through the whole process of making a Dragon Ball episode, from Akira Toriyama to the anime staff and the stress in between. It's a very niche manga that just happens to take place during this time. If you'd like to learn more about this specific manga in detail, I have an exclusive video on Patreon all about it. Or just wait, I'll put it up on YouTube at some point. Episode 88. Because the anime creates a whole filler subplot of Chi-Chi, Yajirobe, Roshi, and the others at Capsule Corp trying to get to Namek, it completely cuts out very minor scenes where Yajirobe and Chi-Chi wonder how the team is doing, with Chi-Chi's scene being the very first time we see Goku's home in the manga. Additionally, this is the first episode with Naoko Watanabe as Chi-Chi, taking over from Mayumi Sho, who stepped away from voice acting when she had her kid. Episode 89. In this episode, Frieza becomes the second adversary Goku bites, something he starts relying on more and more. The first was King Piccolo. He will later bite Kid Buu, Baby Beerus, Whis, Broly, and Frieza again when he's golden. Goku's grab on Frieza here is also referenced in some video games, like in Sparking Zero, where his grab is usually this, but if you do it on Frieza, it references this episode. Episode 90. While the anime gives Roshi, Oolong, Puar, Bulma, and the Dead Z fighters a lot more to do around this time through many filler misadventures, they don't do that much in the manga, and the only real thing we get from them is a special mini-manga showing what they're doing during Christmas. Oolong and Puar are hanging out by the tree, Launch is looking for Tien, Roshi is cleaning, the Dead fighters are playing hide-and-seek, and Bulma is playing a video game on Namek. This would also be Launch's final appearance in the manga. Episode 91. Speaking of final appearances, while Frieza is drowning Goku, there's a whole filler section of Goku having visions of a doomed world, where he thinks of his friends and family, marking the final time evil Launch appears in the anime, though good Launch would appear one more time at the very end of the series, where she gives energy to Goku for the Spirit Bomb. There's also an inconsistency with the last episode, where we ended with the Z fighters finding out that Ginyu is in Bulma's body, but in this one we open with them completely unaware, and finding out in a different way. And because of all of this Ginyu nonsense, when Bulma is sent flying away by Frieza and Goku's battle, neither Piccolo, Gohan, nor Krillin tried to do anything to help her. For all they know, she could have died, but I guess that's the game you play with filler. Episode 92. There's quite a few inconsistencies in these few sets of episodes, as if the teams behind the scenes weren't properly communicating. For instance, in this episode we see the Ginyu Force arrive at King Kai's planet, where King Kai sees them land, but in the next episode they arrive and King Kai comes out of his house completely unaware. Later on, King Kai reveals that he requested King Yema allow the Ginyu Force to keep their bodies as training for the Z fighters, but this doesn't really make sense when you can see their bodies through these episodes on Namek. Episode 93. Although the key required for the Genki Dama, or Spirit Bomb, is simply translated as energy, as in share your energy with me, the technique requires a very specific type of ki, Genki, meaning health or vigor. According to Toriyama, there are multiple kinds of ki in the Dragon world, including Genki, vigor, Yuki, bravery, and Shoki, clarity of mind or true character. This is why in the Buu arc, for example, when humans give their energy to Goku, they end up completely worn out. They've given up their literal vitality. He goes on to say that in real life, people supporting you and encouraging you is them giving you Genki and Shoki. Episode 94. Frieza is the only villain in the entire franchise to get hit by a Spirit Bomb twice outside of video games. The first time is in this episode, and the second time is when he's revived in the special Dragon Ball Z The Real 4D, which was shown at Universal Studios Japan. And in that one, you're the one to give the energy. Episode 95. The anime plays up the drama of the Super Saiyan transformation and the action around it a lot more than in the manga, which really works in my opinion. For example, instead of Frieza aiming at Piccolo right away, Piccolo jumps in the way of a blast meant for Goku. The transformation itself is a lot longer, since in the manga it's almost instantaneous. Other changes include Goku not shown reacting to Krillin's death in sorrow, and Gohan telling Goku that they can't just leave him, something which Krillin does in the manga. This legendary scene is one of the most iconic Dragon Ball moments, and it was brought to life in animation by the fantastic Masaki Sato. He was a key animator in several episodes and movies, including the first Broly film. Prior to Dragon Ball Z airing, Masaki Sato drew up this promotional illustration for companies. It was so early on that it still shows the title as Gohan's Big Adventure in the sketch. And that, my friends, is what we call a callback. Episode 96. The I am speech Goku gives to Frieza is completely different in English as opposed to Japanese, attempting to make it more heroic with
Allied to good, nightmare to you!
While in Japanese and English Kai, it's corrected back to
I am the Super Saiyan, Son Goku!
For the version in Kai, Sean Schemmel, the voice of Goku, insisted that they retain Goku's full name, the very first time Son Goku is said in English. Episode 97. The Grand Elder's tower is destroyed in this episode, but once he's revived in episode 100, it's still standing as if nothing happened, only for it to be destroyed again in episode 102. This episode also shows Frieza's ship falling into the lava, something which obviously can't happen since Goku finds it and tries to use it to escape. Episode 98. Power levels are more or less done away with after this arc. Frieza doesn't even get power levels in the story itself once he goes past his second form, but the Daizenshu databooks give Frieza a power level of 60 million at 50% and 120 million at 100%, just behind Goku's 150 million. Still, none of these are the highest power levels ever given to Frieza, even long after they've gone away. The Dragon Ball Z Real 4D attraction brings Frieza back with a power level of over 5 billion, though there's a power level even higher than that, but I'll save that for when we get to Super. Episode 99. The rules of the Dragon Balls are more firmly defined in this episode, specifically that they can be used to affect those in faraway worlds, and that they can only revive those killed within a year, even if they die of natural causes, so long as it was caused indirectly by a different being, such as with the Grand Elder. Episode 100. Because the anime adds so many other Frieza soldiers being killed by Frieza himself, they should have also been revived by Popo's wish to bring back those killed by Frieza and his men, but since they're all filler characters, they're completely ignored. The anime also adds a whole sequence of Frieza fighting Gohan, who returns after he believes his father died. Because the anime arranged the scene where everybody is revived, in between Goku getting launched into the planet and him coming back, this caused a lot of discourse and theories about Goku dying here and being brought back. But this was purely a coincidence. In the manga, Goku only takes a few pages to return, and Gohan never fights Frieza. Episode 101. In the anime, Vegeta sees Goku as a Super Saiyan in the flesh on Namek before he's teleported to Earth, while in the manga, he only ever finds out about it once he's on Earth and Gohan tells everyone. This scene is completely omitted from the anime, likely because 1. Vegeta finds out here, and 2. A similar scene already happened, where Gohan is taking Piccolo away to the ship, and he has a similar "my dad became a Super Saiyan" moment, although nobody conscious is around, so... Episode 102. The anime adds not only the Ginyu frog being teleported to Earth, but the frog in Ginyu's body being teleported too, meaning that somewhere out there in the Dragon world, that frog is still hopping around as a purple alien. It's also worth mentioning that that body was severely injured, meaning that he's bleeding out, something Dragon Ball SD points out. Episode 103. This episode reveals that Bulma was taught some fortune-telling when she was a kid, trying to use it to find out if Goku would make it back home by burning 3 small leaves, which sadly tell her that he would not. Gohan just gets upset at her for even questioning it. Episode 104. The flashback of Nappa telling Vegeta and Raditz that he's heard that Frieza destroyed planet Vegeta directly contradicts the fact that Raditz tells Goku the fake meteor story, and that Vegeta was shocked by Dodoria telling him that it was Frieza, although I do think it makes sense for them to question the official story. Also, this is the episode where the insane forehead Vegeta comes from. This was animated by Yukio Ebisawa, who is infamous for this sort of thing. Episode 105. The anime censors Frieza's wounds, since in the manga, his guts are hanging out. It also recontextualizes Goku's emotions with his expression as he defeats Frieza, from one of disappointment and sadness to one that's more stern or even angry. Video games nowadays try to adapt the manga version. Episode 106. Going along with Vegeta being a massive jerk in the anime, not only does he celebrate Goku's death, but he beats Gohan afterwards, leaving him pummeled on the ground before flying away. But clearly, the next episode's team didn't get the memo, since this interaction is never brought back up again, and Vegeta is once again sitting under the tree like before. Vegeta even helps out by suggesting they wish for Goku and Krillin's soul to be moved to Earth, so they can be revived. Gohan even tries to shake his hand, as if he didn't just get the shit beat out of him. Episode 107. There's a few interesting things I want to mention for this episode. First, this is the first episode since the very start of Dragon Ball's anime adaptation where Goku doesn't make an appearance. He's only mentioned. Also, in the dub, this is the final episode to use Rock the Dragon as the theme song,
Dragon Ball Z.
since it would be replaced by a new one by Bruce Faulconer. Though, if you've only seen the show in its home release, then you're probably more familiar with the new theme composed by Mark Menza, used for every episode and the films. Since this is the only time I'll get to talk about Rock the Dragon, I also want to mention that there's a Spanish version of the theme song released on a CD, despite the fact that we never saw that opening in Latin America. Only Chala He Chala. And finally, Gohan's whistling theme from the 4th Dragon Ball Z movie, Lord Slug, is used while reviving the dead Z fighters. This would technically be the final episode to cover, but since I'm making a follow-up covering the rest of the series, I didn't want to start the next video with a filler arc. So let's finish off with the Garlic Jr. saga. Episode 108. The events of Death Zone obviously have to happen for this story to take place, but there's many contradictions to this, such as Krillin meeting Gohan for the first time in both the film and the main story. They also decide to bring back Higher Dragon, or Icarus, despite him never getting a proper introduction in the anime. He's not even from Death Zone, he's from Tree of Might, and he quickly disappears from the anime and the movies once the Cell arc proper begins, never to be heard from again, except for this cute art by Dragon Ball Super artist Toyotaro, depicting an older Icarus and Gohan from Superhero. Marin, Krillin's girlfriend, is also introduced in this episode. Her name comes from the French word for chestnut, a name pun she shares with Krillin, as Kuri means chestnut. Krillin did not name his daughter after his ex. The name similarities are purely coincidental. It's unlikely Toriyama realized what he was doing. Episode 109. Chi-Chi uses the Kaioken for a second in this episode, but more importantly, the location and design for Goku's house is changed from what was previously seen in the anime to one that resembles the one seen in the Frieza arc in the manga, but it's still not the one we're used to, since it's still by Grandpa Gohan's home on top of a mountain. Toriyama himself would later change this design during the Cell arc, so this is something of an in-between house. Also, the Sun family has a whole hangar and airplane now, I guess, so good for them. Episode 110. The world I mentioned earlier as having the armor for smaller beings is actually visited by Vegeta while looking for Goku. This isn't in the manga, as Vegeta is implied to never leave Earth there, but the Rit seem to be these beaked people, though it's also sometimes translated as Lit or Lilliput in the manga. Episode 111. In the previous episode, Marin gets taken to Corrin Tower to be safe while she's wearing just a swimsuit. But in this episode, she's suddenly wearing a red dress, meaning that one of them must have had one and given it to her, for whatever reason. Episode 112. Garlic Jr., his father, and his minions are beings from the Makio star, which isn't actually a star, but a planet, which comes close to Earth every 5,000 years. They're all named after condiments, including the ones from the film. They are ginger, Nikki, sansho, mustard, salt, spice, and vinegar. The dub gives this group the name of the Spice Boys, a parody of the girl group, the Spice Girls. In Japanese, they're instead called the Four Heavenly Kings of the Demon Clan. Episode 113. This filler episode really expands on Kami's lore. Not only do we have the lore from the film, where Garlic Jr.'s father was in the running to become Kami, but was rejected for having evil intentions, we now know that the souls of the past gods of Earth live in the Shinsenkai, a realm accessible through the bottom of the lookout, where Kami and Popo will be able to use an opening to spread the ultra-divine water throughout the entire world. We only get ghostly looks at him, but the following episodes will show many more Kamis who torture the current one. Seeing how we lose Kami in the Cell arc, it's cool to see him get so much to do, even if it is filler. Episode 114. Piccolo uses his rarely used size-changing ability for the only time in Dragon Ball Z, at least as far as I can remember, since Toriyama more or less forgot about it after the 23rd World Tournament, and its only real appearance after that would be with Lord Slug, much later. In the Super Manga and Superhero, the technique would return, while in this episode, Piccolo uses it to match up against Garlic Jr.'s super form, noting that it sacrifices speed for the sake of power, an idea that would be echoed with Super Saiyan Grade 3 in the next arc. The previous episode also showcases another of Piccolo's lesser-used abilities, arm stretching. Episode 115. The water used in this episode is just called the Sacred Water.
Pour the sacred water, Mr. Popo!
Which was the first water Goku had to retrieve from Korin during the Red Ribbon Army arc, which turned out to just be regular water. What's actually used in Japanese is the Ultra Divine Water, the second liquid Goku obtained from Korin, which actually made him go through a whole lot of terrible pain before powering him up. Which makes sense, one's tap water and the other is actually magical. Though with names like that, I don't blame them for making it simpler. This same exact change would be made in Dragon Ball GT, where the Ultra Divine Water would be used to get rid of the Tuffle influence on humanity. Episode 116. In Japanese, the end of the battle against Garlic Jr. uses the same theme from the end of the battle against the same villain in his movie.
Wait a second. Don't you remember what happened?
I remember my dad's the strongest fighter in the whole world.
Making for a nice bookend to the arc. I also want to point out that despite the filler arc being whatever overall, I love Gohan being emotional over seeing Krillin be okay, and how much they and their relationship has grown since the series began. Truly an underrated duo. And finally, episode 117. There's a weird mistake here where Yamcha goes from having short hair in the last episode to having long hair at the start of this one, to having short hair again in just a few scenes. This is due to the long hair scenes being him in his baseball outfit. So that's the character sheet the animators had to go on. And that was one fact, or more, for every episode from the Saiyan arc to the Garlic Jr. arc. I'm already working on the rest. Do you have an interesting fact I missed? Let me know in the comments. And if you're looking for more deep dives into Dragon Ball, check out my video explaining where Goku went at the end of Dragon Ball GT.